Record. Okay, it is now recording. Thanks for that. Or Bianca, do you have any questions or areas within interaction design that you're curious about?
That's a great question. I agree. Interaction design seems like a very broad concept. Personally, I'm really interested in like doing a tangible audit of something, but unless anyone has anything else to say in the chat, what are some new / hot trends in interaction design lately, says Christina. And then Tracy says, I like audit +1, says Jean. So yeah,
Okay.
maybe you can do like an audit and then maybe answer
Sure.
questions.
I'll answer Christina's question first because I think it's a good kind of segue. I don't think there's any general new trends in interaction design because it's usually just something that you want to, like the patterns of interaction design don't really change unless you're dealing with an entirely new kind of platform. Like if you're designing for AR or VR or some groundbreaking new technology makes it a lot easier to reduce interactional friction. For example, like if you actually, there is one kind of concept. It's very, very nascent. I don't think any company has actually fully implemented this properly, but it's called adaptive information architecture. And what that means is depending on the type of user you are, and kind of factoring in a lot of different considerations like, like skill level, type of user, location, culture, they'll actually adapt the information architecture and the navigation of your product to make it easier for you to understand. This is very mixed and highly debatable in the industry right now because if you adapt the pattern for every user, then if that user has to access it from like a different entry point, they might get a completely different experience depending on how the model computes, and they might be super confused. It's very hard to kind of execute because it kind of goes against the cardinal sin of interaction design of keeping things really consistent. So I don't know how it's going to play out, but I anticipate in the future when machine learning kind of combines more with design and everything becomes more modular, then we might see interfaces that literally adapt to every different type of user, and every user gets a specific experience. Like we see that to some degree right now with localization, but that's still at the broad country level, but not at the specific user level. So that's my 2 cents. Generally, like visual design is the stuff that has a lot of new trends, and I don't even think that people should be following trends. You should really be kind of using them as inspiration, but there's always like the core things within your product that are going to be the most important. And I think given everything I've read recently, it seems like user retention is kind of like that holy metric for new products and startups to really optimize for. And interaction design has a huge role in that. Bit of a ramble, but I hope that made sense as we segue into the audit version.
Yeah, that was cool to learn about the adaptive informational architecture.
Cool.
And then kind of stay steady. Thanks.
I will share the whimsical link here. I also have, let's see, anyone the link can comment? Okay, cool. Here's a link if you guys want to read this in more detail. I also have an article called Interaction Design is More Than Just User Flows and Clicks. I kind of explain it a little bit, and then I uploaded the recordings of last week's session I ran with Bianca, where I talked about interaction design in the context of, you're seeing all my weird YouTube recommendations, but that's okay. Let's see. A lot of K-pop, yes. How do I grab the link? You can get the link here too. Oh, I shut it down. Pauline saw the most embarrassing one out of the grid. Okay, that's okay. Cool. So that's high level. Let's think about what's a really bad kind of website interaction-wise I can audit together.
I'll just start off with a little bit of Zoom etiquette. So try to make sure your cameras are on, make sure you're all muted if you aren't talking, just so like Richard doesn't get.
Oh, I was like, what is that? I think it's because I played something by accident.
Okay.
I
I was
heard your
like, wait a
voice, but you were
second.
muted. I'm like, that's so weird. I was like, you, sorry. Okay, what's a good website to audit that has a lot of interactional design issues? I usually go with booking.com, but I'm curious if anyone has a more fun example.
Can we do California DMV?
I feel like government websites like shouldn't even count because like
Oh,
there's
okay,
so
never
many
mind.
issues. It has to look like they kind of tried. Like they have at
Okay,
least like a designer.
okay, Jean says Wayfair.
Wayfair.
Craigslist.
I think Craigslist's interaction design is actually not bad. They just have really bad visual design. Okay, cool. Let's do Wayfair. What is this? Wait, do you need an account
Oh, no.
to access this? See, I'm already confused.
I feel like this is like a pop-up.
Yeah, I'm like, what the heck? Okay, there we go. You can do Wayfair. I guess it's an e-commerce experience, so it's like pretty standard. So I kind of talk about this in my interaction design article, but when we tackle kind of like the optimization of interaction design, we can't optimize every single user flow equally because there's always going to be trade-offs. So the kind of model that I use is called a red route analysis. And it's essentially a matrix ranging by frequency and a percentage of users that kind of interact with that flow. And then it has a gradation from like light red to dark red being kind of features that are used often and used a lot. So generally, as you improve your interaction design flows, you want to start with things that are used by a lot of people and used often. So that's one angle. And this is generally if you're trying to improve a product's general usability, like you're trying to kind of fill in the big rocks, so to say. There's another angle where maybe you're designing for a startup and your product is still relatively new and you're still struggling to reach product market fit and build a sustainable business model. In that case, what you want to optimize is for a metric called time to value. I don't know if this is a good graph. Okay, so there's no good graph for this, but time to value is essentially a metric that has a very, very high correlation with new user retention. And as I mentioned before, for a startup, the number one indicator for product market fit is having a solid retention over time because it's kind of your base and foundation to continue to grow and acquire new users. So time to value is essentially optimizing the flow from a new user experience, which includes like sign up, kind of entry point, onboarding, up until the point where they get some sort of value from your product and keeping that as frictionless as possible. So the TLDR is if you're building a new product and it's not fully mature yet, optimize for the initial segment of the experience and optimize for a minimal and reduced time to value. If your product is a little bit more mature, I would do a red route analysis to figure out what the biggest problem areas are first and optimize the experience there. Does that make sense? So Wayfair, which I don't think I've heard of before, maybe it's a US thing. It looks like some online shopping portal. It looks pretty established. So I'm assuming that the whole time to value thing isn't going to be as impactful here. So let's go through the red route analysis. And I think a very easy optimal flow is, actually, can somebody give me a TLDR on what Wayfair is? Is what's the kind of consumer interaction model? Is it something, are they like really expensive purchases? Is it like a Dollarama kind of thing? Is it like an IKEA? What's the general use case? Cheap furniture. Okay, cool. So the things that they're optimizing for is probably going to be how accessible the checkout is, how quickly you can check out and find things. And it seems like the average cart size is going to be quite large since it's cheap furniture versus a very high-end place like, I don't know, like Yonko Design, which might optimize for individual. Actually, I don't even know if this is the right site. Never mind. Or if it's like a really premium place, it might be optimizing for like individual kind of purchases. So cool. So let's kind of map through this one at a time. So usually my way when I think about this is once I've defined the flow that I want to go through, I take screenshots and I plug them into Figma, and then I connect them with arrows, and then I'll call out the mental interaction cost and physical interaction cost of every single step, and then think about the areas that I can reduce or optimize for. So has anyone bought anything, any furniture recently? Tell me your use case. Like, are you moving into a new house? Are you trying to upgrade?
I just got a standing desk from Costco.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's say you're a user trying to get a standing desk. Okay, so this is, so I'm gonna move this out of the way. Okay, so this is the home, whoops. This is the home screen. And then we want to think about the two interaction models of finding a standing desk. So the first way is to search. And take a screenshot. And then we want to think about a specific type of standing desk. So Jean, what kind of standing desk were you looking for?
I was looking for something that is deep, so like large surface, and something that is not not a add-on, so like a whole desk, not like so much.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So it looks like there's a filter here, so you can do long desk and depth. And then something that's not an add-on. So maybe type. So I'm gonna do a few screenshots here. I guess that's just a computer desk. Okay, what kind of factors do you consider when deciding on whether or not you want to buy a desk?
Is it sturdy? Will it last? Is it large enough that I can have 2 monitors at a time, plus some more stationary items? What is it made out of?
Interesting. I never shop for furniture, so this is very new to me. And then I'm assuming you kind of look at the pictures. Okay, and then I'm just gonna grab a full screenshot of the screen. Okay, let's do a piece at a time because I feel like if I just go through the entire experience, you guys are gonna get really bored. All right. Cool. All right, let's plug this into Figma.
Oh, what's the plugin that you use to get the screenshot called?
If you go into the Google Chrome tool store, there is something called full screen capture.
Gotcha.
This is also kind of like good practice for an app critique too. So you notice I spent a bunch of time at the beginning talking about you know, the kind of use case, making assumptions on the business model and what they're optimizing for. That's stuff that you should always include during your interview as well as you talk to your interviewer. So it's like the initial framing. Let's see here. And there's like 2 filters. drawing arrows in Figma usually tends to kind of be annoying. So this is my personal notation. When I move a major step through the flow, I do one right, and then for subscreens, I do one down or in columns. Okay, cool. And then we should also think about the entry point, which I'm just going to assume is organic search for now. Organic search by furniture online. Okay, cool. So taking a step back, the use case for this audit is you're trying to optimize the checkout conversion process for a person looking for one very specific item on their site. And then the entry point is going to be through organic search for somebody searching buy furniture online. And then they land here. Okay, so immediately let's think about all the aspects of interaction cost and mental interaction cost. So I don't know what the best way to do this is. Can we get some audience participation on what you guys think? Content-wise, color-wise, layout-wise.
What's your question?
What are your thoughts from a mental interaction cost perspective on this landing page from a use case of somebody typing in buy furniture online through organic search?
There's a lot
For
going on.
me, yeah, I was gonna say that too.
Not
Like,
sure
where do you click?
in my eyes to on. Sorry.
So a couple things to really think about first. There's reading direction pattern, which is generally F shape for this type of website. So the eye is probably gonna do this. This is like, I don't know how to, 1, 2, whoops. I feel like every time, like I'm really good at Figma by myself, every time I screen share, it's like, for some reason, I'm just like a billion times worse. All right, so 1, 2, oh, whoops. 3. So this is the reading pattern. And then we're also gonna see a directional kind of shift downwards here. There's a concept called a Gutenberg diagram, which kind of refers to the natural reading direction for people in left to right speaking languages, which I'm trying to draw out here. I wish I had a whiteboard. Okay, so this is the reading direction. We also want to think about kind of what the common web expectations are. So I see a couple issues. Oops. Stroke 10. Red. Okay, so breaking this apart. Okay, so there's obviously like a lot of visual noise right now. We want to think about where the attention is drawn, and attention is usually drawn to things that have higher visual hierarchy. And visual hierarchy, 90% of that is going to be contrast. So how do we create contrast? There's color contrast, which is kind of highlighted here. Sorry. Color contrast, which is highlighted here. So the eye is drawn here, but the natural reading direction is down. There's white space contrast. So if there's a lot of white space around the element, that's also going to draw attention to it. Here, the white space is actually very like visually jarring, because if I feel like this should be aligned to a grid based off like how it's laid out, but it's not. So it's actually distracting and pulling my attention away from the standard F-shaped pattern that it could have made a much better use of. So there's that element. There's also really, really small text. So I don't really know what the point of this is because it's like distracting. Like it should be, our reading pattern should be going from, you know, here to here to here to here and then across. But because of the weird white space, the color drawing my eyes down here, I feel like my attention is scattered into like all different corners of the page. Does that make sense? I'll get into like how to redesign this in a second. There's also another principle here called Jacob's law, which is the law of internet usability. Generally, there's a lot of kind of very common established patterns for the internet that most consumers just come to expect. Anytime you deviate away from them, it tends to just add a lot of mental interaction cost and cognitive load because they need to process a discrepancy within their mental model. A mental model is basically like, essentially it's a set of user expectations when they register an experience that matches like kind of a kind of framework in their mind. For example, this is called Jacob's law. Yeah, there you go. Jen's got it. Thank you. Where was I? Yeah, so generally for web, any deviation from a common or established pattern mental model tends to create like a lot of cognitive load. So there's a couple elements here where the menu is located on the left, which I believe it's usually located on the right, but they do have the cart as well. Actually, let me see what menu does. Wayfair, what is menu? Oh, wow, this is awful. Okay, that is actually really great because, whoops. Okay, okay, so this is a huge violation of Jacob's law because if you look at what's inside the menu, first of all, desktops should almost never use hamburger menus. Like it's definitely like a mobile kind of experience. If they put their menu on the left when it typically is in the right. And also from an information architecture perspective, look at the items within the menu. My account, my orders, recently viewed, etc. And then they have a bunch of this extra stuff that I don't think fits within this type of mental model. Typically, the experience that you do see, let's take Medium, for example, is any account related navigational items is always on the right. And they have kind of like a profile image or a sign-in button for that. So for example, when you click down, like all of these things are kind of related to account, whereas all their account stuff is located on the left within the menu. So that's like one issue there. They have search, which is a good kind of pattern, and it does fit within Jacob's law. But I think like the biggest issue here is the prominence of search and how it's like right above browse. Generally, with navigational patterns, there's Walmart with menu. I'm curious. Let's see what Walmart looks like. They might have so Amazon, for example, like they kind of define this commerce pattern. Oh, what the hell? They do it too? Amazon, I feel like is a little bit different though, because like they're like an ecosystem and they have like a lot of IA, a lot more than Wayfair, I would imagine. Let's see what Walmart does. This is a pretty common process too. You're kind of, wow, okay, actually I might be wrong here. This might be a very specific pattern for big box retail commerce. Interesting.
I think you're right in a sense that you know, it is a mobile pattern. I think it just they are trying to reduce the differences between their mobile application and the desktop experience, or slightly bridge these.
Yeah,
Do
I
you
feel
think
like
it could be the reason?
that's an interesting kind of like decision point though, because typically your platform should adapt based off your design should adapt based off the platform that you're on. So that's a very interesting decision. I would actually challenge that. I would say like this is like an example where I'd actually want to run an A/B test because you know, standard convention within the industry use it one way, but I feel like it breaks a lot of interaction design patterns by hiding a lot of the critical information under like a menu button that's kind of obscured and also having a really bad label for it. Anyways, that's a sidebar here, but I guess like search is like pretty easy to find. I would just like bump up the prominence of it and make it a lot bigger. I'd also feel like there's slight concerns with kind of overlapping the browsing experience and the searching experience so closely. Although I guess like from an F-shaped pattern, it might work. Um, hmm. uh, so one kind of common interaction pattern is kind of search versus browse. To understand, the best analogy that I've kind of heard while designing is when you go into a department store in real life and you can find like a lot of interaction models from real life behaviors, there's two types of people. The first type of person, if they're trying to look for something, they'll kind of go aisle by aisle and look for the kind of headings that kind of corresponds to the browse type of user. Whereas there's some people that like directly go up to store clerk and ask them, hey, like, where is this object? That kind of aligns more to like a search type of person. And then on web, because things are much more accessible and easier and there's no kind of like social factor, when people are looking for something specific, they'll do search. When they're looking for something more general, or they're looking for inspiration, or they're more in the consideration phase, they'll do browse. So in our case, since we're auditing an experience of looking for standing desk specifically, we would probably optimize for the search experience. So I guess like this is okay, but I just feel like the attention and the visual prominence of the hierarchy is a little bit messed up, and it's not very obvious like that this is like what they're looking for. So some experiences that do search a lot better is you know, I've seen patterns where I have it on the right, but it's kind of hidden. So they usually allocate like a very, very wide kind of like surface area for the search. So that would be an example of one A/B test I would run, combined with reducing some of the visual noise and the distracting elements from the homepage. Moving on to the next screen here, what kind of issues do we see? I'm gonna draw a few circles. Bianca, do you want to help me out? Any what kind of
Problems that I see? That's a great question.
red is like the potential mistakes that I see. And then green is like, you know,
Good.
Some problems I see is the sale price. I don't know how much you're saving. I know it's a sale price, but it doesn't really tell me. I don't see it. Usually there's like a cross, like a strike through, and tell you it's like $30 saving or something like that.
Oh, that's a really good call. Sell price. Let's see what other issues they have. They have some aspects that are actually, you know, decently well done too. They have the breadcrumbs, and I think this type of filter is decently well done.
Yeah, we have comments in the chat saying weird filtering and visibility. Someone asked, could filters benefit from progressive disclosure? Only revealing the options if the user selects a specific filter. So I think it's like kind of messy filter system.
Yeah, filtering is actually a very hard interaction pattern to get right. So I think they have some degree of progressive disclosure here with the expandable kind of chevrons to expand and collapse certain sections. This is like an okay solution, but I think a better solution would be to surface maybe the top 3 most common options or broad options, and then have like a C more for very, very advanced granular filtering. I'm very mixed on this pattern here of min and max. I think it really depends. If they're browsing, I would even consider an A/B test where you don't show this because they're not likely to have specific measurements in mind. But if it's going through like a search experience and they're looking for a very, very specific piece of furniture, then they might have already done the measurements at home, in which case this could be a really good kind of experience. Although the negative part is that they've kind of moved the measurements into 2 separate areas. I feel like that could be either like a separate experience or sectioned off into its own area. I think the information architecture of the filtering is a huge issue.
What about using like a slider for min and max? I've seen some places do that. What do you think about that interaction design?
A slider for min and max is interesting because I feel like a slider for min and max works really well for price, especially Airbnb's slider. If I can do it properly. Oh, they updated their website. Actually, price slider graph. Let's see if that pops up. Yeah, this thing. This is probably one of the best patterns for price. This slider works really well because you adjust the minimum and maximum and it gives you a visual indication of the quantity, which they don't do here. This is the red circle here. Like they don't tell you, or ideally the best interaction pattern should tell you like how much options you constrain them with each additional filter. The reason for this is because a lot of users will have different degrees of requirements, like soft requirements and hard requirements. And if you tell them like upfront, like, how many results there are for a certain filter, they can kind of flex their soft requirements in a way that gets them a very suitable number of results. I don't know if you guys have ever gone to a site and tried to filter and then you end up with no results and you slowly spend time like trying to increase like your filters until you get results, and you keep like doing it multiple times until you get the desired amount. That's obviously like a really bad experience, so things like this could avoid it. One thing they did pretty well here is breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs kind of show you the hierarchy of how that item is organized. This is really good because they don't see enough results here, which they show. And after they do the filters, if they don't need a desk specifically, they can go up a hierarchy and get more results that way. Although I feel like they could also adapt this into the filter, but it's a trade-off between adding too much and having it be really efficient. Another kind of factor here is when you type in standing desk, they don't keep or preserve your search results here, so you can't modify it. So although standing desk is only 2 words, sometimes you're typing something very, very specific, and having to refine your search manually by retyping the whole thing is a pretty bad experience. They've also generated these automatic tags that don't really make sense, I don't think. So I feel like this kind of creates a bit of confusion for me here, especially because a lot of the search, browse, and filtering experience is based off user trust and how much they trust the tagging and organization of your kind of catalog. And a lot of the times, like there's a whole like aesthetic usability effect where like if the site doesn't look like it's well designed, then they just assume that your filtering system or your tagging or cataloging system is also really bad. So adding like these automatic tags could kind of stress some users out and make them kind of guess whether or not they're seeing the full selection that matches their requirements. So at a very high level, like on this screen, the only real user goal is how do you help them refine their search as quickly and efficiently as possible? And they've tried to do that with this system here, but it's just like super clunky and messy. So one thing that I would do to improve this is to run a tree test. Let's see if we can find an example. A tree test is a system to, okay, this is a pretty good example. A tree test is a system to test the information architecture of your experience. Generally, anything that has to do with navigation or filtering or sorting is an information architecture problem, which is like a subset under interaction design. How a tree test works is you kind of set up the hierarchy of the parent-child sibling relationships for all your filters, and then you give them a specific task, like find a standing desk within like these dimensions that's like this color, and then you have them kind of click through each of these until they find the kind of right filter, and then it computes like a success rate and a directness rate. The number that we're trying to look for right now is a directness rate. If it's like below a certain threshold, then that's a very strong indicator that the filtering doesn't work and doesn't map to the user's existing mental models. Does that make sense?
I think so, yes. I have a question for you. So like for the Wayfair website, how would you actually map out like a tree test or like their information architecture in a way that you could use for a tree test?
So for example, I would have filter, and under filter, it'd be price per item. And under price per item, I'd have, under 150, 250 to 250 to 300, etc. And then have the next item, which is size. So you're basically reconfiguring like the parent-child relationships of this sorting hierarchy, and then like decontextualizing it without the UI, so there's no kind of confounding variables, and then just having them go through a test and go through like that very standardized UI to see if the sorting matches the mental model in their head. And most of the time it doesn't, because it's usually like an engineer or some person that like writes the algorithm or the tagging that like dictates this. A lot of people don't do tree tests. So if you do for a website or product, it can give you a pretty big competitive advantage in navigational issues. And then somebody in the chat mentioned that, it says sale, but doesn't tell you what the sale is. It just has like color coded numbers, which isn't helpful. I think that's pretty obvious here. Another issue here I see is sort by recommended, which is
Recommended by whom?
Yeah, because like I don't have an account, I haven't logged in, and generally like I'll write this down. There's something called the aesthetic usability effect. It has to do with like user trust. And even though like, the designer doesn't do any of the coding or doesn't do any of the, like cataloging or filtering, like people will like trust or distrust your website or product or app a lot more or less depending on how good it looks. And people generally are very sketched out by recommendations, especially now with like, privacy laws and cookies and tracking and all that stuff. So this is usually kind of like I don't know, I would just use recommended very sparingly, like save it for people that have already logged in. I choose like a different type of sort. And generally like a sort and a filter, like sort is basically sort by ascending and descending, and it's usually like price or date added, but they already have price here. So I would even say like this might be overkill. They kind of allocate like a lot of real estate here. I would maybe consider redoing this in a horizontal layout and making it a lot more simple, and then using the principal progressive disclosure to kind of break it into like more steps, and having like a line between the very common filters and the more tactical advanced filters. Does that make sense?
I have a question. What do you think about like these filters being appeals? And one of those interactions when user just adds a pill and kind of it can grow to any of these filters.
I think that's actually a very, very smart interaction pattern because there's a couple advantages there. With the pills, you can quickly see all the filters that are applied and how that starts to constrain your search results. You can also remove them. If you want to get like a really smart kind of pattern here, you can add a drop down to the pill as well. So you don't have like this whole kind of scrolling out of view issue. For example, if they selected, 150 to 200, that would pop up as a pill, but they can also click the drop down to switch between the different price points as well. That might be a solution to A/B test. With this type of problem though, like a lot of it is hard to just make a definitive decision based off just like general interaction design patterns. A lot of it you do need to kind of A/B test over time and slowly optimize, but that's definitely like a really good one that I feel like would be worth testing. I can anticipate this like kind of being like a big optimization point. Bianca, are you keeping an eye on the chat? Did I miss any questions?
No, I think you got all the questions so far. I think people are just responding with comments, but I do have a question. So like I feel like you've been mentioning A/B testing a lot, but then when oh my goodness, I totally forgot her name, but Julia, I'm so sorry. But yeah, when Julia mentioned like the pill concept, like when can you say like, oh, is this something worth A/B testing between concepts, or should we just like think of a new idea? Which one? Like, how do you determine?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the purpose of an A/B test is to make an incremental improvement on a core metric without, risking or impacting the entire business significantly, right? Because like if we just like ship a change that major that has to do with filtering, it could cost the company like a lot of money and revenue if it doesn't prove out the hypothesis. So in that sense, like you would definitely want to think about ideas that are very different and divergent and different enough from your existing design to prove like a meaningful and significant metric improvement to test. But generally, like I don't know, like the percentage change is going to be it's always be incremental, right? Like there's a macro conversion, which is like the sale, and there's a micro conversion, which is maybe the time spent on task for filtering. So if you do a change here to improve the filtering experience, you might not see a macro conversion improvement on number of sales immediately. It might take a long time, or you might need to also improve the experience on like, the homepage and the product detail page before you see an actual percentage change in the macro conversion of making a sale or conversion. But once you do, at a company of this scale, it's usually going to be in the millions of dollars. So that's why like you always need a lot of proxy metrics for all your experiments because you can't measure the big conversions directly. Does that make sense? So it's all gonna be relative, right? As long as you're moving the macro conversions, like depending on the scale of your company. And you should also only be doing A/B testing when a very small, like 0.1% change on the macro conversion actually results in a very big revenue increase to justify it. Like if you have like 1,000 users coming in per month and you improve the conversion rate by 1%, that's like nothing, right? You make like an extra $10. But if you have like, 1 million people visiting per month, a conversion rate of 1% increase could be millions or tens of millions of dollars. So it's all relative.
Gotcha.
All right. We talked a little bit about this. We can talk about the product detail page. So a product detail page is interesting from an e-commerce design perspective because it's almost like a product's landing page. And how you approach landing pages is you need to think about it as almost like a digital online brochure that tackles or it addresses every single possible hesitation or objection a user has from leaving the page, because people's attention span on these things are very, very short. You need to be able to like provide all the information that they're looking for up front in a logical order. So let's think about the major factors. So there's price and discount, there's reviews, there's shipping time, and then there's configurations. Let's see. I actually think this is designed pretty well, but let's see if we see anything.
Does it bother you that all the information is kind of aligned to the left, even though there is some sort of imbalance between the left and right sides?
In terms of imbalance, I think let me see what it looks like on the live page, because it depends on whether or not it's fixed. Interesting. Okay, I think okay, so ideally how I would redesign this is I would make this like a fixed area. So if you're scrolling up until this point, this should stay fixed, so you can still see like all the important information with the picture in view. I think that's the first element. I'd also probably flip it and move this column to the left. I don't know how to draw an arrow. Okay, I would move this column to the left here to kind of better support the reading pattern, have this fixed on the right. I think the biggest red flags for me here is this compare similar items area, and then also customers also viewed, because it's broken up, and then you have like other critical information here that helps them make a decision on the purchase, kind of segments it all the way to the bottom here. So as a user, I think this above the fold experience is actually not bad. It has all the information I need for, let's say, most general consumers, but people that are more kind of, you know, conscientious buyers, they might want to see like reviews and ratings and all that. And so they scroll down, see all these details, and then when they get to this point, they think that all the product details have ended. And if those things weren't enough to help them make a conversion, they would have bounced. So I think the biggest thing here would be to better optimize the space to include the ratings, reviews, customer photos, and these kind of like testimonials and Q&A up here, and then have all the information relevant to the product page kind of conceptually grouped together. So as you're scrolling, it kind of follows that logical kind of progression. And then at that point, there's going to be kind of like a breakoff point where if you track with analytics, you might realize like customers that scroll past this point are very, very unlikely to make a conversion unless they scroll back up, meaning they've already found like their the info they needed to make a decision. At that point, your goal is to kind of like, I don't know, like save the sale or provide an entry point into a product that might better match what they're looking for. And at that point, I would do customers also viewed or similar items. The compatible products is also like, I think, a huge mistake. This area here should actually be the upsell. So after they've added it to their cart, or maybe right before they check out, be like, hey, like here's this product you bought, here's other products from that company, and here are products that are compatible with it. Putting it on this screen is a bit of an overkill. And I think it just like distracts quite a bit. I would bump like the reviews. Like this is like a really big kind of factor. Same with like this rating here, and also the reviews. I'd bump that like way up and just reverse it, and then use progressive disclosure here for the upsell.
Richard, I think you have a question in the chat. John asks, how would you test a change like moving the reviews and correlate that change to more conversions or purchases? It seems like a huge shopping website has a lot of variables that are changing and what affects conversions.
Yeah, that's a great point. So when you do an A/B test, you're basically testing the effect of an independent variable on the dependent variable. So the independent variable here is changing the location of, I guess, the content on this page. And the dependent variable would be, let's say, the percentage of users that click add to cart, favorite, or yeah, just either of these two items. Like this would be kind of the, this would be the dependent variable. And then, oops. Rearranging equals independent variable. So when you structure an A/B test, like you can only change the independent variable only and only change one at a time. So when you run an A/B test, it's actually very costly, and you need like a certain number of users or a certain amount of traffic. So you have to run it for a certain amount of time before you can get statistically relevant results. So there's kind of like two approaches there. If you feel like the site is like, 70, 80% optimized, then running A/B tests for incremental improvements is fine. If you feel like the site has like a lot of really big improvements, I would do some more type of like generative research, like concept testing, to pick like a new kind of direction and then do a comparison test instead of an A/B test. And if that comparison test performs better, then do more incremental A/B tests on the new design rather than trying to change the old design one piece at a time, because that would take forever. Does that answer your question? I don't know if I deviated a little bit.
John.
I have a question. I put it in the chat, but I thought I might be better just to say it out loud. Do you think that where the recommended items are shown may depend on like the purchase that someone's making? Because with like furniture, it might be more like high consideration where they want to check all the details of the item, and if they're already in the checkout, that might like require backtracking to go and check that to add it to their cart. But for like low consideration, maybe quick ads would work.
I think that's interesting. Yeah, I feel like a lot of that would be dependent on like user behavior and patterns. I think like the ideal experience would be to actually like look at the data and segment by type of product and whether or not the entry point was search versus browse, and you might get some more interesting insights there on how to customize that experience a little bit better. Like that might be a scenario where you could test some adaptive IA patterns, but at a very high level, like it's hard to kind of make those like broad assumptions. I'm just kind of, this is like my gut of like what I would change first, but it might not apply to every product. And when you do run an A/B test, if you find like a mixed kind of improvement, then it means that you need to kind of segment or examine your cohorts in more detail to see if it maybe produced a positive change in one cohort, but a negative change in the other. And then once you segment that out, you can kind of just take the change that works for the kind of use case or audience that it works for, and then scrap the rest. But typically that requires like a very, very robust and very fancy kind of tracking system that a lot of startups typically don't have. But then a lot of startups wouldn't be doing the micro incremental A/B testing anyways.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was just wondering if it maybe would depend on like the product, like how much consideration would go behind the product.
Yeah, I feel like one thing that would be interesting would be to like design a page or design two different versions, one for like items of a certain cart size or certain price point versus items that have like a cheaper price point. Maybe in that case, you might want to test more patterns for like upsell. Whereas for like really very expensive products or over like, let's say $500, you might want to do a version that focuses on kind of reassuring them and optimizing for that one conversion, because you don't want to risk losing conversion for, you know, like a $15, I don't know, like add-on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool.
Thanks.
All right, so we're almost out of time. I don't know if this actually went as well as I thought it would. I thought it'd be easier to kind of do an audit, but what I usually do is like I will print it out and tape it to like a whiteboard and draw over it. And I realized that my Figma skills today, Friday evening, is not super great, but hopefully it made sense. I gave you some ideas on like what to look at. A lot of the stuff here, like for desktop, it's going to be focused on mental interaction costs because the physical interaction cost generally is a little bit lower. People are usually a little bit more engaged, and it has to do with the type of interaction context. On mobile, for example, you want to optimize for a very short but frequent, very short session durations, but like a lot of frequent in sessions. Like you might use Instagram like 50 times a day for under 10 seconds at a time, for example. And you need to like kind of design for like a distracted environment and a distracted user. Whereas for desktop, generally the environment is a lot more stable. And although the frequency of the sessions are very low, the session duration is quite high. So I typically find that the physical interaction cost for desktop isn't as big of an issue as long as you're not making them type a lot of things. Just clicking, scrolling, and all that tends to be like very low. A lot of it's going to be on the mental interaction cost because the screen surface area is so wide, and it's much easier to lose their attention and distract them if you don't have a very thoughtful approach on how you structure your page's layout. So that's the kind of high level TLDR, my 2 cents. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I have a final question, if you don't mind. So a physical interaction cost that you mentioned, assuming that they do not have a specific app that goes with that and can be used on, let's say, a tablet, would the transition from desktop to tablet be considered a physical interaction cost as well?
Sorry, could you repeat that one more time? Can you guys see this red scribble, by the way, or is that just
me?
I
can.
What is that? That's so weird.
I'm not sure. I think maybe it's someone annotated.
I think so. I can't delete it.
I think you can delete it.
Okay, I got it. Sorry about that. That distracted me. I was like, what is wrong with my computer? Sorry, please ask your question.
Yeah, so you were basically covering the mental interaction cost and then the physical interaction cost, and you said how physical interaction cost is typically associated with typing something. And my question is, considering that Wayfair doesn't have a specific application for tablet experience, would the physical interaction cost be covered also in this experience on tablet versus desktop? Because, like, for example, when we are talking about desktop, we are talking about a full screen keyboard is not like all the keyboard interaction and all these stuff that are not flying out, not taking space. Is it considered to be also physical interaction cost?
Yeah, so tablets are very interesting. It's kind of like a mix of both. And to be honest, like it's not as well researched because the percentage usage of tablet is very, very low. I think it's like last time I checked, it was under 7%. So market wise, it's never been a huge focus. It also depends on like whether or not the iPad has like a detachable kind of keyboard and stuff. So instead, what they're actually opting for is global patterns that work well for both the phone and the tablet to reduce interaction cost of typing. For example, I have no idea why this is on desktop. Oops. Sorry, what is this? Oh my God.
That's an
Zoom had a
annotation
draw
Zoom
feature this
tool you
whole
have to.
time. Oh my God, I'm an idiot. I've been doing it. How do I cancel this? Okay, cool. For example, on desktop, they have like this like image icon. I don't know when somebody would have an image for desktop, but like this is very common on mobile and tablet to be able to take a photo and use that in place of writing. Like it's very common now in credit cards where you can just scan your credit card instead of having to type out the whole number. They also do voice to text, and that's becoming, the adoption for that has been increasing. So it seems like companies are investing in voice to text and camera capture over just like supporting better typing experiences. Because on mobile and desktop, it's like very, very easy, especially down for mobile. Like if you see like, you know, teenagers can type like some crazy like 120 words per minute on mobile. Tablet, like the market penetration, the usage and coverage is so low that they're not really adopting any like tablet exclusive solutions to reduce that typing interaction costs and just kind of optimizing for mobile ones that can transfer over. Does that make sense? That's
Yeah,
my
thank
2
you.
cents though. I'm not like an expert on tablet design, so I'm not sure, but I think that's generally where the industry is going. All right, I'm happy to take 5-10 minutes to answer any questions. I don't know how useful this was. Sorry, guys. I think I planned it to be a lot more engaging and exciting in my head, but I think I should have picked a website that I actually use. But I'm happy to answer like very specific kind of questions on interaction design related to this or any topic in general.
I think you got a question in the chat. You got 2 questions in the chat. Okay, first one is, we talked a lot about A/B tests, but what about other kinds of tests like multivariable testing, concept testing, etc.? When would you want to run one over the other? And then Jean asked, how do you assess someone's interaction design skills in an interview setting?
Cool. I'll answer D. Kim's question first. So A/B tests, as I mentioned, it's more for established products that are trying to make an incremental improvement to a KPI or metric that usually has a really big business payout. Startups and new products that aren't mature yet wouldn't do A/B testing because it's just like a bad use of their resources. It's usually very costly for a very small improvement, and that small improvement isn't worth it for that startup. They're mostly concerned about, you know, achieving product market fit and sustaining that. A multivariate test is kind of like an extended version of an A/B test, and this is for like very, very big companies with very robust data tracking structures to actually do it in detail. And that's also for the cases of incremental improvements. Like I could see Wayfair doing a multivariate A/B test here, where they test like maybe like 4 different layouts at once. And typically you do that when you have a lot of different ideas, but you have a lot of different ideas, but you also have like a lot of potential reach. So you can still get statistical significance even if you split your testing cohort into multiple groups. Concept testing is something that you do very, very early on for a product, and startups should do this. Any new feature or product should do this. You're essentially, it's like kind of the precursor to the usability test. Usability test determines like, can somebody complete the task you gave them? And concept test is like, do they even want to complete the task, if that makes sense? So it's more just like kind of getting that initial feel or sentiment from your target user group, and you want to keep things relatively mid-fi, not too high fidelity at that point. And again, like I always say this, but testing is to help you make better decisions. If the test doesn't help you make a decision, then there's no point doing it. If it doesn't help you avoid a very critical mistake, then there's no point doing it. There's no kind of hard and fast rules on which tests to do and when to do them. A lot of them is like a case by case basis. Just kind of familiarize yourself with the general methods, how to run them, and kind of being really diligent on crafting research questions that actually matter. a lot of companies and a lot of startups, like sometimes they'll do research or do testing for the sake of testing because they think they need to do it. That's obviously like not a great move. I really think about like, how reversible is this mistake or decision? If I make a mistake, like what is a business impact? And is there a big deviation from a common principle or pattern when deciding on whether or not I want to pursue a research question? Does that answer your question, Deacon? Cool. So I'll answer John's question because it's similar. So A/B testing is very, very specific. It requires like statistical significance. You have to launch the product and you need a lot of people to actually use it to produce that statistical significance. If you're testing 2 prototypes, the word prototype implies that you haven't actually launched it and you're not getting mass reach. A prototype is really just for usability testing. And it's just to see if people can understand and use your product. It's not used to tell you how well that product is going to do from a metric perspective, because for metrics, you need a lot of quantity. Does that answer your question, John? Does that make sense? Cool. And then Jean's question, assessing some of these interaction design skills in an interview setting. Generally, it's going to be through like an app critique, which I sort of did here, although it was a little bit scattered. I would probably choose like a more narrow use case. And also an app tends to have like, it tends to be easier to kind of audit. You also kind of want to just like look at like how well they understand edge cases, interaction patterns, interaction cost, and areas where interaction cost is really high. For example, like a very common bad interaction model is when you download an app and they force you to create an account before you get any value. Or when you're going through onboarding and they ask you for like 20 different fields. So when you do your app critique and identify areas of high friction, that's usually a very positive indicator that you have some sense of interaction design. Does that help, Jean? Cool. Yeah, Jung, testing 2 prototypes, not an A/B test, has to be shipped. Cool. Any other questions, guys?
I have one for you. It's on like customer journey maps, because I feel like a lot of the information that we're putting on is a little bit like speculative and like it's very like data backed. But do you feel like a customer journey map would ever be like kind of relevant in conducting like a big study, or is it, I don't know, do you have any opinions?
Yeah, customer journey maps take a long time to create. It's one of the most expensive research artifacts you can come up with. And some people will do it just because, but there's only 2 points where I think a journey map makes sense. And this is opinion and also not absolute. It makes sense at the beginning when you're mapping out your user journey relative to your competitors, or mapping out the existing user journey to identify a problem in the market that you want to solve. Sometimes like when I create like what I'll do for a new product that has a very complex behavioral model is I'll map out what the user is currently doing, and that might be using a combination of different tools and hacks to get to their desired result or solve their problem. And then also look at are there other competitors out there, and what are the highs and lows of their kind of experience. And then if you see like a lot of competitors have a really bad experience in one aspect or for a certain type of user within their journey, that's a potential like blue ocean area you can target and create like a really good experience to capture that frustrated kind of segment. The second point is if your company is a lot more mature and maybe you've achieved product market fit in the past, but the market has evolved and your users have evolved and you're not sure. It's kind of like when your company like feels like it's slowly losing market share or slowly dying. That's when you want to run a journey map to make sure that you understand the end-to-end experience and whether or not your product still fits in the way you think it does, And are there new areas of the journey that your product could kind of capture or help them improve? And kind of mapping out whether or not there's any competitors kind of within that journey that might be competing with you on market share. Like this typically happens when there's like new channels for distribution for your product. For example, like if you think about OG video games, right? Like back then the original channel was like web portals like PopCap, MoFunZone, like all that stuff. And then it moved to like social distribution through Facebook, and then you have like Zynga. And then it moved to like mobile, which is like Supercell and stuff. And as those kind of distribution models change, typically those are really good points to reassess the user journey to make sure that your product is still fitting with the current kind of user behavior and their ecosystem and like the channels that they currently use. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool.
Very good answer.
All right, guys. If there's no more questions, we can sign off for today. Thank you so much for coming on Friday. Just a quick note, from now on, we are gonna make this every 2 weeks. But I will prepare slides next time if you guys come up with a very specific topic. Something more specific than broad interaction design, like a very specific topic. I'll prepare slides, we'll have like nicer visuals, and it'll be a bit more rehearsed. Yeah, I guess that's it. Read my newsletter if you guys haven't subscribed. I'm going to talk about some of the stuff in more detail. I'm going to publish one on Monday or Tuesday on what time to value is, how retention works, and retention thresholds. A lot of that will be related to what I mentioned today on kind of optimizing for retention, that new user experience, especially for startup sized companies. If there is no specific topic, it will be a freestyle. Honestly, like they're all freestyles. I did this whole thing to practice freestyling because like when as a designer, you have to learn how to BS sometimes, for lack of a better word. But I do want to produce like better, more specific and tailored content for you guys. I don't want to just be like talking in front of a camera without any visuals. So I will try and do slides next time. If you guys vote or comment, or if somebody asks like a really good specific question in the group, I'll be like, all right, this is next week's topic, and then I'll make some slides for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. See you guys. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.
Yeah. Some people say they like when you improv.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're like, yeah, it's organic.
Well, like I'm not gonna prepare a script or anything. I'll just be the topic will be set, and then I'll pull some slides and references related to the topic, and I'll still freestyle the content of the talk. But we will see. Thanks for co-hosting, Bianca. I appreciate it. For keeping an eye on the comments.
Yeah, he said like 2 things. But it's cool.
It's okay. Okay. Well, it just helps like having like a person to like talk towards.
Got you. Yeah, that makes sense. But that's cool. Dude, I was like browsing Craigslist trying to figure out like why the interaction costs were, or like the interactions were like better in a sense. And I was like, this is really interesting. So yeah.
Actually, I haven't looked at Craigslist in a while. I wonder if they improved.
I don't know.
I mean, like, visually it's not great, but like
Gets the job done.
yeah, the information architecture makes a lot of sense.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And there's no kind of it's like very minimal, so I think it works for its use case. Like her audience is like older people, right? Like they don't want to deal with like all the fancy HTML5 and JavaScript stuff. So
Makes sense.
anyways, I'm gonna sign off. See you later.
All right. Bye.